Now, how did Culture Club go from global triumph to self-destruction in the 80s?
Well, I think it's just like, it's sort of the great, exploding inevitable, really. I mean, all bands, throughout history, if you go, I mean, I think the Rolling Stones are probably an exception, but the Beatles, I mean, there's so many examples that you could pull out of a hat of groups that, reach a sort of point in their careers and then hate each other because, the singer's getting too much attention. That was obviously a huge problem in Culture Club because my personality was so much larger than everybody else's. And it was always like, well, why don't you interview this person, or why don't you interview Roy or Mikey? And they always wanted to interview me. And because I was kind of going out with John, John kind of got special treatment, so he would always be it'd be sort of George and John and Mikey and Roy. And, there were always arguments about that. I remember Roy kind of almost being turned away from this sort of Culture Club party in New York because they didn't know who he was, and they sort of pushed him out of the way, and he was very upset. But I used to see that, and it would upset me as well because I felt for them, but at the same time I didn't feel that it was my fault and I should take responsibility for it. I think you should stand up for yourself.
Now, you must really appreciate how loyal your fans have remained.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been very lucky in that respect. But then I think that, that's how I behave as a human being. And I think if you give, you get back. I mean, there are people that, were kind of around in the day and they've grown up and they've got married and they don't come to concerts, and that's fine. That happens to some people. And then you have other people who are kind of incredibly kind of obsessive and, they know what you're doing before you are. They know about your next move before you've even made it, before you've even decided you're going to do it. You get fans sort of coming up to you and saying, oh, you're going to Singapore in 3 months. You go, I am. It's news to me. And then you find out you are, So, I mean, fans are much more resourceful than we used to be. I mean, I was a huge Bowie fan, and I would sit outside his house and, go to every gig, but I would never have flown to America.
Your autobiography, Take It Like a Man, is extremely honest and pulls no punches. Did you find it therapeutic writing it all down? And did that lead on to you writing your Sunday newspaper?
No, I think for me I started the book long before it was published. We were doing the last Culture Club album, which was Luxury to Heartache, and I was in Switzerland. I'm bored out of my mind, and there were lots of days when I just wasn't doing anything but waiting for things to be done in the studio. I bought a computer and started writing about school, about how much I hated it and how much I thought that it was kind of like, almost like a prison sentence. I mean, I think that I've always had this view that you should go to school till you're like 14 and then work for a while, then go back for a while, and then leave. I think that you need to be out in the real world, and I also think that one of the things they should add to the curriculum is emotional intelligence, especially for the teachers, because sometimes they were worse than the other kids, people like gym teachers who would be such bullies and make your life hell. I hate exercise, except if it's verbal.
Which of your records are you particularly proud of?
You mean Culture Club records? Yeah. I think probably Victims and That's the Way are my favourite Culture Club songs, because they're very simple but they're very personal. And I think one of the sort of most amusing things about our success is that when Virgin wanted to release Do You Really Want to Hurt Me as a single, I kind of marched in there and said, this can't come out as a record, it's too personal and people won't get it and it's too long, and I was like, if you put this out, I'm leaving the band. What a fool I was. And I remember sitting on the stairs kind of being really angry, and they were like, well, we're putting it out, and that's the end of it. And I was like, well, it's going to be, a disaster and no one's going to buy it. And I was so wrong. And that was kind of like a form of discovery for me, because it was like, so being really personal is what it's about. And so as I've got older, I've kind of worked more and more towards being, sometimes I think probably a little too personal. But, back in the day, in the show we did this bit where I'm recording one of the first songs that we ever wrote, which was called The Eyes of Medusa, and I was using the word he. So I was going, he loves me, he hates me. And the engineer actually did stop me and say, do you realise you're singing he? And I was like, yeah, because I didn't realise that it was an issue. And the rest of the band were like, well, if you sing he, people are going to be a bit freaked out by it. So everything became kind of ambiguous, and I think I've reached the point now, particularly in my own work, and also with some of the stuff I've done with Culture Club, where I sing about things that are actually real and part of my life. You know, I'm not going to do a Will Young and kind of sing about some imaginary female whilst, you know, claiming to be openly gay. You know, I mean, I'm 1 in 10, isn't it, apparently? Well, I think everybody's queer. But that's just me. Call me old-fashioned.
But what do you remember about the beginnings of Culture Club?
Mikey, in a way, kind of started the man. Mikey was the sort of beginning of Culture Club. Mikey had seen me in a magazine. I'd been in Bow Wow Wow for really the blink of an eye. It was like 3 months or something. And Malcolm had kind of set up this photo of me and Annabella, and it was in the NME, and it said I'd been fired. And at that point, I was called Lieutenant Lush, and Mikey saw this picture, thought I looked kind of interesting, and came to, I was DJing at this club called Planets, and he sort of came up to me and said, you know, I saw you in a paper, you know, can you sing? And I was like, well, you know, yeah, people have said I can sing okay, you know. And he said, would you want to be in a band with me? And I was like, well, I've never really thought about it, but okay. We exchanged numbers, and that's really how it started. And John was kind of, you know, John had been in bands, and I'd also met John before, sort of accidentally. I'd seen him around, and suddenly it was like, you know, I was calling John up and saying, oh, do you want to be in this band? I mean, I've been chucked out of Bow Wow Wow for being too effeminate. You know, Malcolm thought, you know, thinks I'm going to be a drag queen and end up at the Vauxhall Tavern. And I remember saying to John, do you have a drum kit? And he was like, yes, I'm a drummer. And I just felt such an idiot afterwards. But that's kind of how we started. And then we found Roy. And we kind of, he'll hate me for saying this, we only chose him because he had a good haircut. He was a good player, but it was mainly his hair that kind of got him the job. He had a great quiff in those days.
So, George, any musical ambitions left to fulfil?
Oh, I mean, I think that you're never satisfied as an artist. You know, you always think that, you know, your greatest song is still lurking somewhere in your loins. You know, you think, oh no, I think it's just, I think a lot of it's timing, you know, and I think also, you know, the problem with Britain as a kind of pop culture is that they're not the audience are incredibly loyal, you know, they're fantastically supportive. And, you know, the fact that I just recently got voted one of the top 100 Britons was like, well, why don't you buy my records then? And the reason they don't buy my records is because no one ever hears them, because they get played anywhere. So obviously people have to hear things, and I think you're up against so much, you know, kind of, you know, very high-handed kind of marketing from record companies. You know, you've got this sort of boy band thing and the sort of Disney, and you have that thing in America where everything's kind of cross-collateralized, and it's the movie and the advert for Pepsi, and, you know, we were never that cheap. We just always said no to everything. You know, we were asked to kind of, last year we were asked if they'd let us use this Karma Chameleon for Burger King, and I'm vegetarian, so go figure. You know, the band wants to, but I was like, no way.
Well, all the best for the future, and thank you, George.
Thank you.